Well, hello there. Welcome to the Odie Thorn Alliance. I'm Jacob.
And I'm Luke, and we're the YouTube channel that offers the non-biased opinions from two different perspectives. That is someone on the autism spectrum, and that is someone who is not. If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe. We bring out lots of new videos each week. And what are we doing in today's video, Jacob?
We are reviewing Ms. Marvel, and it should be a doozy one.
So let's summarize Ms. Marvel for those who haven't seen it. So Ms. Marvel forms part of Phase 4 of the MCU. It is a Disney Plus original. The main character is a Pakistani American teenager, Kamala Khan, who lives in New Jersey. She is given a bracelet from a relative over in Pakistan, and when she puts on the bracelet, she finds that she has some kind of powers that she doesn't quite understand why, but she knows that there's some kind of connection with another realm of some sort. She kind of falls back and goes like an out-of-body experience, and she can feel and sense another realm. Through that, with training with her friend Bruno, she learns that she can kind of create these blocks and use that to kind of like jump, or she can use it to like make like fist and like use it as a weapon basically. But she doesn't really explore as to where the powers come from or what its actual limits are. The show then focuses around her discovering where the powers come from, evil from another realm, these clandestines, or the jinn as they call them, basically want to take over. Well, they want to bring their realm to our realm. So she realized that her goal is to stop that, and the bracelet and her are intertwined in her family history. So the show heavily focuses on that and has a very Pakistani Oriental flavor to it, and that's how they kind of, it all ties in through that, and we get to see this show travel from, to New Jersey to Pakistan and back, and it's an interesting story to say the least. Is there anything you think I missed that you want to add before we get into some scores, and then we can really nut out what this show was to us?
I felt like you did a very good job. I would say parts that it did very well was showing a different aspect of Marvel, with how it deals with different cultures and different families. But as a superhero show, I don't think it does It had potential at the start, and then I think it falls off with adding too many boyfriends and too many things like that. And I don't know if people outside of MCU would like that. So yeah.
So in essence, it's a coming of age story, kind of an origin story, and then we mix in this diversity and trying to be quite oriental in it. So we're going to give it our scores, and we'll talk about it more, because there's lots of things that we want to discuss about it that we'll probably ruin it if we tell you it now. So do you want to go first? Tell us what you gave it, what percentage it got, and why you gave it that.
Well, out of our percentage of 100, I gave it a 64%, and I think it roughly deserves that score. It isn't a terrible show, but thinking critically, I thought about it, and I thought about how would I recommend this show, because I think the important elements that it does well and what it doesn't do well, and what it doesn't do well is, unfortunately, tell a compelling story. It did it at the start, but it fell off. And I think, unfortunately, we don't get I just didn't buy how the powers work, and unfortunately, we got too many boyfriends, like I said, and I think it tried its best with telling different cultures, and I think that aspect of the show worked, but as a superhero show, I think it tries to juggle too many aspects of it. It's trying to please too many people, And I guess I understand why. I feel like this show is very mixed between a lot of people. Some people really love it, and some people really hate it. But for me, I just found it not as good as the other Marvel shows, and I just wouldn't recommend it. I don't answering that question. I don't think it's worth your time, and kind of let down by it, but had an okay journey throughout, and yeah, 64%, and the acting wasn't as good as it could have been, and kind of didn't nail all the things that it didn't need to nail.
So I went just fractionally higher. I ended up averaging out my score, and it came out to be 65%. I think this show that's just as good as it could have been. It lacked in so many areas. The plot was a bit all over the shop. The villain wasn't very clear. The origin wasn't great. Her powers were kind of like not understood very well. We didn't get a training montage or any real understanding of how she came to be able to utilize them. I don't really know what her limit to her powers are, whether, could she withstand a bullet, or like if she was punched by Hulk, would Hulk be able to just destroy her? Because she is just a little girl, like I don't doesn't fully explain all that. I think it was made to really appeal to the Pakistani audience, and I think it did a good job of that. The directors and the cast members all, when I saw the credits, were all very, they had Pakistani or Indian names, so it had that real like Oriental sense to it, and I think it did well if that's your culture, because you would have had a lot to relate to it. But as an Anglo-Saxon white male, I didn't have much to relate to it. So it probably wasn't made for me, and that's fine. It felt like boring at times. I wouldn't say I overly looked forward to the show, and was it worth the time? Probably not. I agree with Jacob. If I wasn't already invested in the MCU, I wouldn't watch it at all. The fact that it was part of the next, building onto the next phase, I kind of had to watch to find out what happened next. And I probably could have just watched the end credit scene of the last episode, and that would have covered it. So I don't know if I needed to invest my time in a whole series. And I don't know if I could recommend it to someone, and if they haven't seen it, they're in the MCU, maybe just ask for a summary. Like, there's no point investing your time, because it wasn't very enjoyable, and I'm interested if other people feel the same. Let's move on to spoiler parts and get some questions. So our rating was somewhat negative, Jacob. Is there something you did like about the show? Something that stood out for you?
I really enjoyed the family dynamic of her father. I think the actor did a really good job, especially in the last episode. I thought that was the best scene of the show, and why she got the name of Miss Marvel. I think the scenes with her father and her were probably the standouts. But unfortunately, it kind of doesn't deliver in some aspects that I were kind of wanting, how it sets up in the beginning.
I think for me, maybe the best part was almost, weirdly enough, the worst part. Like, I didn't relate to the Pakistani and the traditionalness in it, but that kind of made it unique and cool, but it wasn't cool and unique for me. Like, maybe for those that could relate to it, I'm sure that would have been a standout. And I applaud it for going that direction and, diversifying the MCU. It just, it wasn't made for me, but, there's probably a billion other people out there that it was made for. So maybe that's better in the long run for the MCU. So it's worst and its best thing, probably that.
Yeah. Do you feel like that, because personally, I feel like the start was really cool. She was a superhero fan herself, and then she got her powers, and then she did 2 training sessions, and then she suddenly knows how to use her powers.
Yeah, I think they rushed that really badly, and I think when she went to, Pakistan, it changed it, and it sped up the progression of her powers fairly quickly with no real explanation. So that was a letdown for me. The whole clandestine and Jinn thing became confusing, and again, where does this sit in the MCU? Is it of importance whatsoever? I think tying it in with Captain Marvel is cool. I'm glad they've done that because I guess we're going to get the Marvels movie, which we'll all link into. But yeah, it was just an interesting show, I think, and it definitely felt rushed, and her powers were not explained.
Yeah, do you feel like we needed all the free boyfriends that she had?
Well, when we saw the first trailer, we really thought it was going to be, focusing on that, like this teen drama. And I think that would have been a better direction. So it tried to put it in there, but kind of missed it. Like as you said, she kind of had multiple possible love interests, but nothing came of any of them. So they probably either shouldn't have been there or they should have been more of importance. Like I wouldn't have minded a show where it was more of a teen drama, but she happened to have powers. That could have worked. That would have been something different. Whether it was needed or not, I'm not sure. But, one thing that I liked, I don't know if you like this, I think it was cool how they experimented with the visuals and the artwork of this show. I think that to me was probably where I gave it one of its highest scores because they played a lot with, the graffiti that was on the buildings or the neon signs that were in the windows, and they used that to tell a story. And I hadn't seen that before in a show, and I think that was very, very unique and visually appealing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Unfortunately, with her telling the audience in her mind and her drawings, they kind of stopped that with her mind from episode 2, and then they did it again in the last episode.
Yeah, I think that was a really cool thing they brought to it. What did you think about this control squad, this kind of team we were introduced in this show that I hadn't seen in any previous other MCU shows or movies?
It was hard to understand the danger control, how much power they had, what was like their boundaries, what they could actually do, and I don't know, it was like, well, there wasn't really much story explaining what grounds they had and how much power they had. Are they part of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Who knows?
Yeah, and they didn't seem to be fearful of heroes. Like, she had powers that they were unsure of, but they were willing to take on these people, just they look like average men with weapons. Do you think that anywhere in that it ties into this secret war? Like, we know that Captain Marvel has something to do with the Skrulls. Do you think that somewhere this show may have secretly had something to do with that? Because they kind of focused on the two people that were the leaders of this control squad. Do you think maybe one of them was a Skrull and that might explain the way they acted in this show?
Maybe.
No, I'm just wondering whether Marvel's, buried something in there and planted it for future, or whether I'm just overthinking it. Because they seem to have very different agendas. There was the male who told her not to engage, no weapons, to retreat, but then she was very adamant, even though she knew she'd lose her job, that she wanted to pursue in trying to capture Miss Marvel. Why would she do this? Is there something more that the show seemed to focus on her a bit, and she probably wasn't an important enough character to deserve the amount of attention she got? Maybe there's more to it.
So how did you feel about how the villain motives, and then she suddenly, with the crystal, the shiny powers, and then she died, and then it suddenly went into her son? I guess somehow when you die, your essence go to your child?
It was, rushed, confusing, and I still don't fully understand what happened there.
I don't know either.
Yeah, it was, the show just seemed to skip over a lot of important details, and, whether it needed more episodes to clarify these things, would have that made a difference, maybe?
Did you find it strange how the Marvel was so, controlling? You can't go to Avengers Comic-Con, and then in the final episode she accepted that she was a superhero?
Yeah, it was a big difference and change in the way that she went from her, not wanting to speak to her mother to once she went there, changed her perspectives of her daughter and everything. It was a full
180.
full 180 there. The other thing that confused me about this show was supposedly I guess it was her Kamala Khan's great grandmother was clandestine. She had this bangle or bracelet, and somehow she knew that she got it to her future great granddaughter, that her great granddaughter could use it to go back in time to prevent.
And she wasn't even born
Yeah,
yet.
I don't understand the logic of how that
didn't
works, because it required her in the future to make the future occur, and that, in terms of a butterfly effect, you can't rely on the future to change the present. That doesn't work because the present affects the future. So she would have died and that wouldn't have happened. So then, therefore, her great granddaughter never would have been born and would not have been able to come back and do that. But it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the end credit scene and what we're left with?
Oh, it was pretty cool seeing Captain Marvel somehow there. It's kind of worrisome where Miss Marvel is, but that's why we'll be needing to watch the Miss Marvels now. And I guess I will have to be honest though, I don't know if any of the shows have been like, yep, needed to watch that to watch the movies. I think the only one has been Loki and WandaVision.
Yeah, they all kind of add something, but none of them have been game-changing. WandaVision and Loki definitely add a lot, but Miss Marvel and Moon Knight so far have just introduced characters. They've not really changed everything. So, yeah, it's interesting. And what do you... I've read different things online, but what do you think the link is between Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel? They can somehow, swap places, or is one the same as the other? Like, what do you think that means by that end credit scene?
I guess Miss Marvel is now somewhere in the galaxy and have switched around.
Yeah, I wonder what ties them together besides the fact that they share a name.
Yeah.
Like how Captain Marvel somehow ties into this bracelet. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to explain that. I wondered if the show was going to follow the direction of the Avengers game, where Kamala Khan goes to AvengerCon. There's some kind of weapon that goes off, and then it causes some people to get powers and others to die, and she uses her powers for good. And I wondered if it was going to go that way, but in that game, the Avengers go into hiding and some die, so I figured that wasn't going to be the case. But they went with something completely different, which you said was different to the comic books again. Yeah, so they change it up a bit, don't they, the MCU?
So final thoughts?
Below average, disappointing, give it a miss, probably.
I concur. I think it tried its best to expose what's like living and breathing a different culture, but I just found it had no substance, and definitely it tried to have stakes, but really the stakes mean nothing because nothing eventuated. And like I said, I think the best part of the show was her conversations with her father and seeing Captain Marvel at the end. But besides that, would definitely not recommend it to anyone besides Miss Marvel fans and people that enjoy the MCU. But besides that, yeah. Well, thank you for watching. We are the Obi Thorn Alliance. If you enjoyed this video, check out more content when the video is finished. Like and subscribe. Let the force be with you. Bye-bye.